Hello and welcome back to Building Microservices with Go. And with me, Nick Jackson, and it's been a little while. Can I kind of apologize? I've just been kind of feeling a little busy, as everybody has at the moment, but I really do hope you're all keeping safe. So what I want to do in this episode is I want to take a look at refactoring. And specifically, I want to kind of refactor some of the code that we've written so far to get it ready for the next level. And the next level is I want to start looking at gRPC streaming. So let's begin. Some of the things that I want to look at when I'm doing the refactoring is kind of give you some hopefully some insight into what I'm thinking. I think the key thing to remember is that nobody writes perfect code first time. Rarely. I mean, I think quite often you find that you think you've maybe written some good code, but more often than not, you end up changing things. And I think the key thing about writing code as well is you develop what you need for when you need it, rather than trying to, overly thinking everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of these services. We're going to pick up where we left off when we were partway through looking at gRPC, and we're going to get ourselves ready for implementing the next big section of gRPC, which is bidirectional streaming. So let's begin. So the first thing that I want to look at is our currency server. So when we originally implemented this currency server, this basic gRPC server, we just wanted to get something working. Just wanted to kind of test something just to kind of prove the concept. But I think it's time to kind of start putting a bit more logic into here. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement a new data service, and what the data service is going to do is actually going to retrieve us exchange rates from the European Central Bank. So let's have a look at this. So what I want to do is I want to add a new package, and I'm going to call my package data. So I like to take this approach when I'm building my services. I like to do things like putting handlers or gRPC endpoints into things like server. I like to keep things for my protobufs in, protos, and like data objects, databases. It feels good for me to put things into packages like data. When we start to look at things like testing, which we're coming up to very, very shortly, you'll understand, I think, why it's good to have a nice clean separation between the different layers of your application. It enables a very sort of efficient testing approach. But for now, we're just going to implement that rates service. So I'm going to call it rates, rates.go. And my package, is data. So what I need to do is I need to create a structure, and the structure is going to be an exchange rates strut. So I'm going to define, again, type. I'm calling it exchange rates. It's a strut, and it's going to have a couple of properties. So one of the properties that it's going to have is a logger. Really, really important to be able to find out what's going on, have that sort of passive debugging with log files and things. So I am using hclog, and hclog is a package. There are a number of different loggers available. It doesn't really matter as long as you kind of choose something and keep running with it. What you'll see through this episode is that we're going to kind of refactor away a lot of those very basic standard packages, and we're going to start to put in more structured packages like the hclogger. It's going to make our life much easier as the application grows. So this exchange rate, what it's going to do is it's going to hold a map of exchange rates. And the rates are just going to be marked by a currency code. And we're going to define just a float for the value for those. So following those kind of good Go idiomatic practices, what we want to do is we're going to create a new function. So func new rates, and this is going to just take a single thing, and it's going to have a logger. So it's going to pass in an instance of hclog.logger. It's going to return an exchange rates reference and an error if it can't create something. So there we go. We've got the kind of basics laid down there. So now what do we want to do? Well, we want to be able to get the exchange rates from the European Central Bank. So first, let's just define our collection of exchange rates that we're gonna kind of get. So let's create our exchange rate object. We're just gonna call it ER, and it's gonna be exchange rates, and it's just gonna have log in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate the rates collection, have map, string, and float 64. Well, way too many float 64s there. Maybe floats of maps and maps of floats. Float 64. Wow. Sometimes you can't get IntelliSense to work. Sometimes it just works too hard for you. Just do as you're told there, you little thing. All right. So we've got that running. So we need to be able to populate those exchange rates and get those from the European Central Bank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a function called getRates, and that's going to make a call, which is, it's not a RESTful API, it's an XML-based API, but it's going to make a call to that, and we're going to be able to retrieve the data from there. So first things first, let me just clean this up so that it's going to pass, just to kind of get rid of any error messages. So the URI that we're going to hit is this one here. Let me just quickly bring this up in my browser, and I will show you that. And I'm going to zoom that up. So this is on the European Central Bank. And what this is an API which returns the daily exchange rates for the main European currencies and global currencies such as the US dollar, etc., etc. So we can see that it's coming back. And this is the structure that it's returning for us. It's not JSON, it's returning us a Java, gosh, I'll be in trouble. Always associating Java and XML, but it's returning us an XML data structure. This is fine. We can actually parse this with Go. Let's look at it. So what we want to do is define ourselves a getRates function. So I'm going to do func, and I'm going to add a method onto my exchange rates object. So E exchange rates, calling it getRates, and it's going to return an error, because if it's successful, it's going to set a value on itself. So let's see how that is going to work. Now, I can see there Ivan is eating ice cream whilst I'm dealing with XML. I don't think that you need too much explanation to know who's got this right. Is it the person sitting dealing with XML, or is it the person dealing with ice cream? Ice cream wins my book. I'm taking one for the team here. All right. We're going to get that data. So how are we going to get the data? We're going to use the standard Go API. So we're going to do response, error, standard approach, http dot, default client, and we can just make a simple GET request. We don't need to pass an API key or anything like that. So we can just use the kind of the bog standard request. And we're going to use that XML-based URI that we had from before. Idiomatic Go, if error, return nil. Okay. And now we can start to handle the request. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to check whether the response, well, has it been successful? Have we got a 200 code? Because if we haven't, there's absolutely no point in even processing anything further. So let's do that. So we're going to say if response dot status code is not equal to http dot status OK, then again, we're going to return an error message. And we're not going to return we have to create the error ourselves. So it's going to be return format dot error f, and we're going to say that we expected error code 200. It's not really an error code if it's a 200, it's a success code, right? Anyway, we expected a 200. What we got was, well, what did we get? Whatever came out there. Response dot status code. So that's going to be set up like that. And then we obviously always want to close that response body. Just kind of get rid of that, clean everything up. So we're going to put that in a defer statement. So now we can start processing our data. So we're dealing with XML. Now with Go, the nice thing about Go is that we can use the package XML. Well, encoding XML. Let's take a quick look at that. Thank you, Go folks, for creating this for us. Encoding XML. Coding XML. Gosh, I should have been more specific, shouldn't I? Go bang. That's what I'm looking for. Way too lazy to do anything properly. So we have an API here, which is very, very similar to what you're going to find with the JSON encoder. We've got things like an encoder that we can create. Same way. There's a couple of extra elements, but for predominantly, you know, you could see yourself just using new encoder.encode. Like the way that we build up our JSON encoding, we can also use tags and things. It works ever so slightly differently because XML's kind of structure, but it's easy enough. I genuinely hope you never have to deal with XML. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing at one point in time, but yeah, not anymore. I think it's had its day. But anyway, let's look at what those structures are going to be like. So what we have is this structure here in our data. We have this cube, which is quite a top level, but it's the top level after the XML envelope there, SOAP envelope. And then cube has a cube in it, which has a cube in it. Because I mean, why wouldn't you? But that's exactly what I would do if I was creating XML. I would have 3 layers, all with the same object and slightly different parameters. Right. So we're going to moving on, and we're going to look at those objects. How are we going to create them? So what we're going to do is we're just going to use struts. So we can do type cubes strut. And we are, well, what we're going to call this? I don't know if it particularly matters, but I'm going to call it cube data. And it is going to be a slice of cube, which I'll define in just a moment. So we can use these XML strut tags. So I'm going to add XML. I am going to specify that I want to extract the cube from the cube from cube. Well, you're actually going to read it backwards. What we're going to get all of the cubes into this slice from the cube in the cube. Okay, is that all these cubes from this cube in this cube? Clear as mud, absolutely. Right. Once defined, always forgotten. We don't need to worry about this anymore. Let us define our cube to put our cubes in. And what is cube going to have on it? Well, let's again look back at this thing. So we have currency and we've got rate. So we need to add 2 types. And we can define these as strings because they are pretty much just strings. It doesn't really matter. Let's just do it easily. We can convert it later. So then we're going to do currency. And it's going to be a string. And again, let's use those strut tags. This time we're going to say XML currency, currency, and atta. Right. What is going on here? So what I'm doing is I'm using a strut tag, and I'm defining that I want to extract the currency attribute from that bottom level cube. And we're denoting that we want the attribute by using the strut tag here, attra, for the XML encoding. So I'm going to do rate, and I'm going to do string, and again, XML rate, attra, atta. And that's all we kind of need to define our data object. So now what we can do is we can go and we can fetch that information. So when we want to fetch the information, what we can do is very simply, we can use a decoder. So let's first create our collection that we're going to put data into. So we want to create our containing structure, which is just cubes. So MD, and I'm going to call it MD cubes. And then to get data into there, exactly the same as if you were using the JSON decoder. So XML is one of the lovely things about Go. A lot of the kind of the standard libraries, a lot of care and attention has become put into these things to kind of make it feel very, very familiar. If you've used one type, a lot of the others are very, very familiar. It's a nice thing. So new coder, that takes an IO reader. We can get that from the response body. And then what we're going to do is we're going to call that decode method. And we are going to pass in the reference MD. Okay. So now we've got our code there. And they're going to be stored in there, but this is a string at the moment. So what we need to do is we just need to loop over this collection, convert them into floats, and put them into our array up here, which will be quite easy. So let's take a look. We are literally just going to loop over it, loop over the collection. If I can type, which I can't, always the keyboard, correct, Ivan. And md dot cube data. Oh, I can't spell range. md dot cube data, like so. What should I call that? C. Okay. So then I can just convert that. So I'm going to call my rate. I need to get an error. And then I'm going to do string conv. And I can do parse float. I can get my rate from there. And what is the sort of the size that I want to put it into, the bit size? Well, I want to create a 64-bit. Whoops. Wow. There we go. Not 65. You don't want a 65-bit. You want a 64-bit. Now, let's tidy up this. What is it? This thing complaining about? It hasn't auto-formatted, which means there's something gone awry. Well, we'll take a look at that in just a moment. So first things first. So if error is obviously not equal to nil, then I'm going to return the error, because I should be able to parse every single one of those. And if I can't, I want to throw an error out of that. But once it's done, what I can do is I can set my collection here. So I can set e.rate. It's not correct, as it should be rates. Let's correct that before my OCD gets in the way. All right. So we want to set e.rate, which is a map, takes a string. So we can use the cube data that we're getting, and we can use, what did we call it? Currency, which is our currency code. Currency. And then we can just set the value there, which is going to be our rate. And that is pretty much all we need to do there. We can do return nil, because we're not returning an error. but we're pretty good there. There is a little issue in here somewhere, and can't see it off the top of my head, but I know it's there because it didn't auto format. Well, we'll find that in just a second. So we've got that code. That's all good. So let's test this. Now, it's kind of a bit of a catch-22 for me, because I wanted to introduce all of these concepts in a kind of a very straightforward and, well, like a very structured way. I had this kind of grand design that I was going to talk about gRPC and RESTful before I talked about things like testing. And I kind of still maintain that, because I don't want to overload people before get to kind of a really, what I think is a little bit of a complex topic. But at the same time, tests are incredibly useful for just checking your code as you go along. It saves you a lot of time of having to spin up the application and kind of keep things running. So what we'll do is we're going to do a little bit of a little teaser of what's to come around testing. And I'm going to show you how to write a very simple test in Go, which is going to allow us to kind of test out our new rate service. So I'm going to add a new file. I'm going to follow a convention. So test files in Go follow a convention. Rates test.go. It doesn't matter what I put before _test, but _test signifies that this is a test file, and therefore it'll be ignored from most of the compilation. I have to put it in the same package. So package data, and then I can define my test. So a test, func, test. Now, every test that you create in Go must be a function. It must start with the word test. So I'm going to do test new rates, and it must have the sort of function signature t dot testing. Doesn't return anything, and it's refusing to import, but we'll get it to import there. So import. There we go. Well, oh my word, sorry. Testing dot t. It's a little bit late. Everything in my brain is backwards today. So this is what a very simple test function works. Now we've got there's a little comment there from Edwin about table testing. I'm not the biggest fan of table testing, and I'd have my reasons for that. My predominant reason around why I'm not a huge fan of table testing, and I prefer a more sort of a verbose approach to testing, is readability. And this is very much a personal thing, and I'm not advocating that everybody follows the same thing, but for me, I find I can't decipher in my brain what's going on in a table test. And I can when I have a very sort of verbose approach. So I tend to have function names for my tests, like test new rates does something and returns something else. Because when I look at that, I can decipher what's going on there. With a table test, I find it quite difficult. But we'll take a look at both of those options, because as I said, everybody's got to find the best approach for themselves. But test new rates anyway. We just want to create a test on this. So we're going to create our new rates. I'm going to put a logger in there. So let me just do hclog.default. And then I can call the get rates on there. New rates returns me an error, doesn't it? Yes. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to do something very simple right here. And we're just going to say if error is not equal to nil, then what we're going to do is we are just going to do t dot fatal error. So I want to fail the test immediately, and I want to pass this error. We'll kind of, I'm pretty certain. See how that works in a moment. Then around tr, well, I mean, just for now, let's just print that out. So format dot sprintf, and I'm going to do sorry. If I can find on my keyboard percentage hash v, going to do tr dot rates. So let's just get rid of those rates, right? So if you're using Goland, or if you're using Visual Studio, or if you're using Vim, or anything really, there's a number of different ways you can run tests in Go. You can use the command line. So I can use go test. We're going to look at all that. I just kind of want to show you something quick here, but I kind of like running this. I think this is a really useful thing to do. So there's that error as expected. So it's kind of we've got a syntax error. We must be missing a brace somewhere. Let's have a look. Line 53. And we have, no, we're not missing a brace. We are missing a speech mark there. And let's see, what else have we got? And we've also spelled struct wrong. Well, all the things. But it formatted there, so I think we're back. Run test. Okay, cool. So that test there passed, which is a good thing. Now, I want to kind of have a look at those rates, and if I run like go test in here in Visual Studio Code and it's passing test, it's going to kind of hide all of this stuff because it's just burying it for me. So I'll quickly show you how we can do that from the command line as well. So I'm just going to go to currency. I'm in this folder here, so I can do go test -v for verbose mode data / rates test. Let's just run this. Data, sorry. Let's just test the package. So we can see everything is all good there. Let's see if we can get this. Why is it not? Oh, wow. Look at that. Wow. sprintf. We don't want to be sprintfing. It's very late. There we go. So we can see we're getting that map there, and we could just loop over this and just kind of play around. But one of the things I think is really useful here is this debug button. And again, I'm just going to give you a quick teaser into what's coming and some of the things I want to show you. But with a debug test, what I can actually do is debug my code. So I can go down here and I can set a breakpoint. And this is using the delve tool. And again, I don't want to go too much into this, but there are some nice tools with Go. I hit my debug test button, and that's going to execute my code, but I'm going to stop at my debug. Well, it doesn't be getting any data back. So this is interesting. I can actually debug this. Let's just set another. Oh, well. Come on, chat. You didn't even notice that we weren't actually even calling the rates service. Let's do that. So we're going to do get rates. We'll seed it. And that will kind of set that up. It'll populate everything. And of course, get rates, well, we can just return the error from that. And then if that's null, it'll be fine. So now let's go back over to our test. Let's do it in the terminal. Running our test, and you can see there now we've got all of this data coming back. So this is what we expected. Again, let's just hit that debug test button, and I'll show you this. This is a really wonderful tool. I'll be 100% honest with you. I was a huge user of Vim, NeoVim. There were two things which made me switch to Visual Studio Code from that setup, and that was using things like this for debugging tests and being able to pair with people, being able to kind of do VS Code live shares. All of the other things I'm kind of like on the fence with, but those two things make such a huge difference. All right, sorry about that. I was waiting for an ambulance to go back. So I can step through this, and you know, I can kind of see all of the values. You can see them there on the left-hand side as I kind of step through. So it's a really powerful tool, and we will look at this and a lot of other tools in as this kind of course progresses, because we do have there's a lot of complexity when it comes to microservices, but we'll kind of get there. But I think for now, that's a little bit of a starter. I'm going to do more of these debugging videos and more of these refactoring videos to kind of just go through, and I'll do those over the next sort of couple of days. I hope you find it interesting. I'm kind of hoping that this sort of stuff and having these insights into maybe some of the ways that I think is useful. If you, I'll be honest with you, if you speak with my wife, an insight into the way I think is probably not what she would see as valuable, but you never know. Some people may do. And until next time, I want to thank you again, as always, for watching. I want to encourage you to always hit that like and that subscribe button. And if you don't like, hit the don't like button and tell me why you don't like. And I will make sure I do my best to fix things. But thank you so much. And I hope everybody's well there out on chat, and thank you so much for joining today. It's a Friday, and if you're all out in Europe, enjoying the bank holiday, which I didn't get the opportunity to go to. Edwin, you know, VS Code's not bad. For a free tool, I think it's pretty good, but I have to give it to the JetBrains folks. They've been creating amazing tooling for years. I mean, I couldn't, I can't remember how many years. I remember seeing the very first, when they launched the beta of Android Studio, which was a complete rewrite and move from Eclipse to IntelliJ's, like a free version of IntelliJ. And that was, I can't remember when that was. It was at Google I/O. I had the pleasure of being in San Francisco and watching the keynote, but also the owner of JetBrains, who literally blew my mind with the way that he was programming. Just kind of everything on the keyboard. He knew all of the keyboard strokes. Absolute genius. So yeah, but all of the great tools: IntelliJ, Goland, WebStorm, PyCharm. JetBrains do great work, and I'm not sponsored by JetBrains, but they do great work. Does before I kind of I bounce downstairs and take my good old doggos for a little bit of a walk. If anybody has any questions or anything like that, I'd be more than a pleasure to answer. Can I do a code review on my... Ooh, Edwin, that would be fun. Yes, I can. I would... I'd love to do that. I think folks might find that interesting as well. Yes. Let's... if you ping me... well, ping me anywhere. Ping me on the channel or on Twitter or anything like that. And we can maybe sort something out for a midweek session, because I think that would be really interesting. Why did we switch to rates? So we switched to rates because I'm trying to just put a little bit more maturity into sorry, it's exchange rates, right? So this is just the currency service. So what I'm doing is I'm just trying to put a little bit more realism into the application, because a microservice application does kind of have a lot of different component parts. It calls different services and different kind of upstream services as well, which you don't own and don't control. So I'm just trying to kind of put a little bit more realism, build out the application into something that you would kind of see more of in the real world. But no, we're 100% still on the coffee shop. But now you can order coffee, get a price in a different currency. So we're international. We're hitting the big time. I mean, it's all virtual coffee, but well, we do our best. Any other folks have any questions? And obviously, if you have any questions as well about general sort of microservice tooling, DevOps, or anything like that, I'd be more than happy. Yeah. So permissions and roles, one. I do plan to look at that. It's actually really quite a complicated. I don't think in terms of technology, but I think it's a complicated scenario. Permissions and roles are very much organizational and systemic based. So the kind of the approach we will cover sort of loosely, because I believe in using. I'm a big fan of JWT and a claims based approach, decentralized authentication and authorization from that way. And we will cover that at some point. Oh, how can you find me on Twitter? I am Sheriff Jackson on Twitter. I must admit, I don't Twitter as much as I used to. I kind of occasionally, every day or so, I might drop on there to kind of take a look and scan the news after I've read the newspaper. Ivan, you can ask a HashiCorp related question. Do I follow event sourcing and CQRS? Yes, I think CQRS and event sourcing are really, really important technologies for microservices. I think CQRS and command query separation is really, really useful for building scalable distributed systems, and also kind of thinking about the distribution of work and distribution of responsibility. I think event sourcing is an incredibly useful approach, specifically when you want to start to break down systems. So I will be honest with you, I find fully asynchronous event-based systems cognitively very, very complicated. Again, that could be a personal thing, but I have a real hard time kind of trying to juggle the kind of tie all of those things together. But when you want to distribute a system or you want to break out a monolith, the easiest, or one of the easiest ways that you can actually do that is by using things like event sourcing and by sort of transparently kind of shuffling off data into another part of a system. There's some Vernon Vaughan who covered a lot of the sort of the domain-driven design. I think some of the work that he has been doing is incredibly good. I think centrally for me, when I start to think about CQRS and event sourcing, thinking about who owns data, where data should be, within which domain does it exist, I really recommend folks picking up some of that stuff. Payment service like Stripe. Yeah, maybe. I think that could be interesting, actually. I might do that as kind of a side approach. One of the things that I think is really interesting about a lot of the payment services like Stripe and PayPal is that they actually have incredibly good SDKs, and they have incredibly good SDKs, and they have incredibly good APIs, or most of them certainly do, certainly Stripe. And I think that could be really interesting. The thing I think is interesting around that as well is from an authorization stance, because when we come to integrate with an external system, we have to follow their authorization and authentication methods. And more often than not, you'll find it's OpenID based, but yeah, I think that could be really interesting. I definitely want to take a look at that. How bad is it if you run Nomad, Vault, and Console server on the same virtual machine? It's not bad at all, really. I mean, I think the key thing that you sort of need to think about, I mean, Console and Nomad is probably fine. It's everything about load is a big sort of concern. Now, like a Nomad server isn't going to be doing a lot of work unless you're scheduling a lot of jobs. And the same goes for console. Unless you're asking it to do a lot of things by giving it a lot of service requests, or you're asking it to generate a lot of certificates for mutual TLS and things like that, it isn't going to do so much. It's going to sit there quite happily. So from a kind of a load perspective, you possibly be okay. Now, when it comes down to Vault, you have a slightly different problem, because then you're starting to think about attack surface. So is your application more vulnerable because Vault resides on the same machine? I would probably say no. I think it's like everything. It's always better to have as many barriers between. But when you think about the way that Vault works in terms of its composition, if you don't have a key and you don't have a sort of access to the server, whether you're running it on localhost and you're on the same machine or not is neither consequence. I mean, you could potentially do some stuff by maybe being able to read the memory of the local machine and kind of fish some secrets out of it there. Generally, most stuff is kept in an encrypted state anyway. But yeah, maybe you could like fish a key out, like the kind of the main encryption key. I don't know. I think certainly that would be the one service that I would think about moving elsewhere. But again, it depends what you want to use it for, right? I mean, it's sort of and again, it depends on your sort of appetite for risk, and like everything in security, it's a balance. What good books do I recommend besides my own? Well, I wouldn't recommend my own book right now. I think I'm hoping the second edition is going to be really good. I'm completely rewriting that at the moment. Good books that I recommend. Let me think. What have I read recently that I've really enjoyed? I'll be honest with you. I tend not to read too many programming books. I think in terms of programming books around Go, certainly I keep thinking Kernighan and Ritchie. It was I don't think it was Kernighan and Ritchie. It was who wrote the classic C book. It was one of the Paul Kernighan, who wrote a good Go book. But one of the Go books that I've genuinely enjoyed is Go in Action, which was written by Bill Kennedy, Eric St. Martin, and that was a sort of a really lovely book, very reasonably to kind of very nice to read. So I would recommend checking that out. And I think Bill does some great videos on O'Reilly if you have an O'Reilly subscription. Anything by my good buddy Michael Hausenblas, Liz Rice. I think she's a wonderful author. She's written some great stuff on sort of Kubernetes container security. I think she's got a new a new container security book out, which I haven't picked up myself yet because I've just been kind of a little busy, but I've read her other books and they've been great. So I would heartily recommend anything. Is it possible to generate a root token if Vault migrated to transit seal type? So regenerating the root token. So you mean by the way that that's the one, the Kernighan and Donovan. So with the sort of the Shamir secret approach or anything where you've got the key, you can actually generate the new root token for Vault. The intention behind that is that you should get rid of the root token for Vault as soon as you can, because you shouldn't need it. What you should be doing is creating a setup which gives you, as an administrator, the permissions you need to be able to do the things you need to do. If you have to rely on the root token, you've probably got your own security policy a little bit incorrect there. Now, that's not to say that occasionally you might need a root token. You might need to do something which can only be done in that way. And the kind of the traditional way around that is that you can regenerate the root token either using the sort of the Shamir secrets or the kind of the key to do that. Can you do it with transit, the transit seal? That's a really good question. I don't know about that off the top of my head. I would suspect the answer is yes, because generating a root token is a pretty important feature of a vault, especially if you lose, or as I say, you deliberately destroy. But off the top of my head, I wouldn't be able to. If you, hey, Loreni, if you wouldn't mind just sticking a comment somewhere, or if you at me on community.hashicorp.com, so HashiCorp community discussion site, then I'll dig into that, because I'll get you an answer on that, because I'm curious myself right now. I'm pretty sure it's possible, but it may be one of the exceptions. You tried to do it. You're afraid of the root. Well, I mean, something has to have trust with any security system. It even with something like Vault. I mean, the sort of the pure concept around Vault. So maybe this is interesting, folks. So there's a concept called Shamir's secret, and Shamir is actually the S in RSA. He was one of the people who came up with the RSA algorithms. So the concept behind Shamir's secrets is that you can take a piece of data and you can break it up into a number of different parts. And then you need a number of these parts can come together to reconstruct it. So for example, I could have a key and I could break that key up into 5 different parts. Now, I could make a statement to say that I need 3 of those parts to recover the key. So the other 2, I can do 3 out of 5. So when you think about that as in terms of a security approach, when it comes to something like unsealing Vault or generating a root token or something, then you distribute trust. So for example, Ivan and I are completely trustworthy, maybe. But there may be somebody in the team who isn't. Now, unless all of us come together, none of us can get access. So that's a kind of the principle behind Shamir's secret. No one individual has the responsibility to be able to unlock the server. It kind of distributes the trust, which is a nice thing to do. When you start using things like auto unseal, what you start to do is you move that trust. So you move the trust from an individual to a cloud account. Now, well, an individual potentially has a cloud account. Yeah, okay. And transit secret, you're kind of taking a very similar approach. It, as I said, security very much is a balance between performance, speed and performance of your application, the complexity of the process, and the security of the data. The more complex, generally, you're kind of going to end up with something that's more secure, but it can be more awkward to operate. Yeah. Let's have a look. What is my opinion? Generics and the up-and-coming Golang. What will cause developers to plague Golang with bad patterns? So, I'm on the fence with generics. I will be honest with you. If you kind of think about there are certain elements of Go which have generics. So things like sorting in a slice. That is technically a kind of generic. You can do a lot of things with generics with implementing interface methods, but I think one of the areas where Go really needs generics is when you're dealing with unknown data entities. So for example, if I'm parsing a collection of different types. Now, at the moment, what I end up doing is I end up writing those pretty nasty switch statements, and I end up kind of like casting things back and forwards, and it's clumsy and it's quite uncomfortable. There's a lot of boilerplate, but what a lot of people like about it is it's easy. It's kind of cognitively easy, and it's not easy to do bad patterns. Now, when you kind of introduce complexity into a language, it's not implemented just for the sake of the complexity. It's there for a reason. But the key thing is that complexity actually means that things are harder to understand. And I don't like that. I'm not a smart guy. I kind of like things to be simple and that I can understand. I don't have a great memory. And And when sort of Rob Pike and Russ Cox and Noel were looking at creating the Go programming language, one of the things that they wanted to move away from was C++, and specifically they wanted to move away from templates in C++ because they found that templates were implemented badly because people didn't really understand the nuances of the language or actually what the good patterns were. They just were like, oh, this is a cool thing, I'll implement it. And it was misused. And I think a lot of folks look at generics in Go and they say, hey, this has potentially got the same opportunity for abuse. In an ideal world, you would only limit the use of generics to a very, very sort of limited subset. But there's a belief that people will use it everywhere. That will create the Go code to be more complicated and difficult to understand. And I think they're kind of a lot of the resistances around generics in Go. I'll be honest with you, I think it will be fine, but who knows? It's one of those things that only time will tell. Eric Veld is asking, what is my favorite show on YouTube? Well, my favorite show on YouTube is a show called HashiCraft. And HashiCraft is a rather light-hearted look at the world of DevOps and DevOps practices and tools, seen through the eyes of Minecraft, which my good buddy Eric Veld and I have been playing around with. And let me just HashiCraft. It's a little bit of fun, and I'd recommend, if you so want, give it a try. We've been going through and we've just been showing people how to do some things here, like using stateful storage with Azure container instances. And yeah, I should probably just update this Terraform. Do it all from Minecraft, which Terraform with the new Minecraft folder. Now we're kind of using Minecraft kind of fun. As an illustration here, but you don't have to use Minecraft. This kind of Hey Nick, what are you up to? Check it out. Well, just watching a little bit of Twitter. Like and subscribe. That's where the HashiCraft. Well, there's no money in this. This is all for the love of it. Alrighty. I believe my wife will be returning from her mother-in-law's. Her mother-in-law's. My mother-in-law. It's not her mother-in-law. My mother. Very, very, very shortly. And then my dog will be barking. And I'll have to go take him for a wee. But I very much enjoyed chatting with you all this evening. And, as always, please put a comment below. Anything you like, anything you don't like. Let me know. It's the only way I can kind of help to make things better. Any suggestions you've got for content, HashiCraft. We're having a blast making this, and I hope you like the content. But the Friday videos, it's very light. It's just a little bit of fun. I will bid you farewell. Have a lovely weekend, and I might do another one of these tomorrow night and see if I can get this refactoring done so we can start digging into that gRPC bidirectional streaming. But until then, have a lovely week.